Coming up on the Week 7 postgame show, a lot of fun playoff stuff to talk about. It's really one of my favorite shows because we have the scenarios of if this team wins and this team loses, then they're tied. A whole bunch of good stuff. So we're going to break down who's locked into what seeds and who is still playing for which seed, kind of the highest and lowest those teams in the middle can go. We had I think to me, a semi-disappointing Week 7. It was supposed to be, a big week of matchups and rematches. The Halfway Crooks didn't show up. The Road Dogs did show up. Lob City partially showed up because Almar didn't show up in time. But a really good game between Lob City and the Road Dogs to talk about. And then we're going to preview Week 8 and kind of roll that into the playoffs and a lot of that seeding stuff I talked about. 3 analysts standing by, so stay tuned for all that. But first, a word from our sponsor. This episode is presented by Initial Response Restoration. They need to come to the damn playoffs, right? I'm over Week 8. We need to get them there to watch some playoff basketball, which is taking place in less than 2 weeks. 24/7 emergency services for water, fire, storm, and mold damages. Contact them today. Initial Response Restoration. We restore, you recover. Enough of me. The intros are always too long. Let's do it. Let's the playoff preview show, the Week 7 postgame show.
Yeah. This is the legacy league. Tell me where your legacy be.
I can't leave out the little bit of history that we had in Week 7 as well. A shout out to Gian Abedisian, 1,000-point scorer. He joins the club. There's 15, 16, 17, 18 of those players in all the leagues combined, and he's the fastest one to do it. Shout out to him for doing his own research, too. That's how we like it, right? Do your own homework, and you get a shout out on the podcast. So shout out to Gian, who also had a big game in Week 7. And it was funny because Aidan and I were sitting over there like, yep, this is normal. Here we go. And talking about a former MVP. And he's looking healthier by the week. And so that's going to make for some fun matchups in the playoffs and in Week 8 with Lob City under 500. As we get ready for Week 8. So that's not something you say all the time. Let's just go right in order. I lied. Why would we do that? We're starting with Lob City, all right? And Lob City falls by 4 after a huge run in the third quarter. But let's get to the best game from Week 7, the rematch, Lob City and the Road Dogs. A change of plans, but a good change of plans. The Road Dogs win 68-64. Jess's Road Dogs. We said it before we started. I'll put my hand up first. I thought Lob was going to win this one, especially with Gian, and that part was true. That was a big game from Gian. They needed it. Cody Crawford wasn't, hitting as he normally would, and Lob City found themselves down 10 at halftime. We're not going to go through the whole game, but a shout out to Mike, a 26-2 run from the third into the fourth quarter, and things flipped, and that's a credit to the Road Dogs. To overcome that run, they had a lead. They no longer had a lead, and they were able to battle back and get it even, and then make those plays down the stretch. They got some stops. Got some points. I know that's how you win a game. You get stops and you score more than the other team. It's what the Road Dogs did, and they needed it to make those key plays. And so a huge bounce-back game from them. I'll do stats in a second. Let's go to Jess first. Your Road Dogs, they get the win. They're now 5-2. They're now still in play for that 2 seed with the Halfway Crooks loss before that game took place on Tuesday night. But what did the Road Dogs do after that massive run? And then we'll go to Mike to kind of talk about that run. And I'm crediting him with that stat. What did the Road Dogs do to kind of overcome that barrage from Lob City to hold on and get the win, Jess?
Yeah, they came out with a lot of energy starting off. They knew that they beat Lob City before and that they could do it again, even with their additional players. So I feel like they just had a good rotation going in. Ethan Austin, he was driving to the basket, and a lot of people were saying stuff about him, dribbling too much, but he was creating that space between the players, and he was able to get up and get a lot of points down for his team. Joseph Secunder getting those threes. We love to see it. I think the team just had a lot of energy going in. Obviously, in the first, we saw them get ahead, and then we saw them get a little frustrated, take a step back, and I think it's honorable to mention that Lob City was able to play as their own team and kind of not focus on what the Road Dogs were doing, and I think that's what allowed them to get a little bit of a lead. And like you said, Gian, he started hitting and he was getting it going, and once they got that tech, I think that the Road Dogs were yeah, we're not letting them get ahead of us anymore. Took that opportunity to get back in and just drive to the basket, moving it around, and just a lot of really, really good basketball played by their team.
We'll talk about that in a second after Mike goes. And yeah, so a 3, 4, 5 point swing in that fourth quarter, Lob City by 5, and then they weren't up 5 anymore because of the technical, and then the 3-point shot immediately following that by the Road Dogs. And a huge play, a huge series of plays that then, Lob City still had their chances after that, and it just didn't break their way after that. Mike, talk about Lob City, and then I'll give some stats. But during that run, so they find themselves down 10 at halftime. Coming out of halftime, it's like more of the same, where they're kind of just keeping pace and kind of keeping that lead at 9, at 10, at 12, at 8. And it was around that margin until, I think it was a lot of Gian Abedisian, right? And he started hitting some threes, definitely hit back-to-back ones at one point. The court tilted, as I say, right? And I say it all the time, and that was the perfect example of kind of what I mean, where it's like, the Road Dogs can do no right, and Lob City can do no wrong. So what was going on during that run? Because it got them back in the game, and it built them a lead. And then it kind of flipped again. But what did Lob City do well during that stretch that we should see more of from them in the future?
And then down 10, as you said, going into the second half. And then it was 45-34, Road Dogs still up in the third quarter. But it was around that time where there was some disagreements being made on the Road Dogs bench. A little bit of a scuffle on the sideline, just words though. And I think Lob City was able to take advantage of that, especially as we talked about Gian. 37 points, 50% from 3, and especially with Cody Crawford being held to under 10, Gian definitely had to make up for it. And especially because he had his first week back last week, he didn't play as great as, maybe we expected him to play, but now a huge bounce back, almost 40 points here in week 7. And that's really all they needed. Just a little bit more maybe from Cody Crawford, and they would have been able to pull out the win over the Road Dogs.
Well, and yeah, like I said earlier, hand up, I got this one wrong. Maybe if Almar is also, playing, right? I think that's another huge piece that they can kind of rotate in with some of the guys we're about to talk about, right? So we'll do Lob first. You mentioned Gian's 37. Hachi Amini with only 11 and 1 of 6 from 3. And he was getting some good looks. I can picture 2 corner threes kind of in semi-transition that he had, and just I don't think he made either of those. And so that would have been a huge swing early in the game as well. But 9 rebounds for him. Cody Crawford with 8 points and didn't make a 3. And so you can kind of see a lot of the areas that Lob City's probably like, what the hell? Just like a bad shooting night from them. 7 of 26 from 3. And the Road Dogs killed him on the glass. Ethan Austin with 16 rebounds, 26 points for him. Still 6 of 18 for the Road Dogs from 3. And Kevin View's 2 threes, I can picture them, kind of prevented the Lob City run from happening earlier. Right, he hit some big threes, semi-contested. I mean, no one was really fully wide open in this game. But in the half court, hit 2 big threes when you kind of thought Lob City was going to make that run in the second and maybe early in that third quarter. Kevin Views hit a 3 to kind of keep them, at bay. And then Lob City eventually did make the run, and that was what the Road Dogs were holding off. But Joe Secatore with 11, Anthony Lyons with 10, and a 41-28 rebounding edge, and a 13-5 offensive rebounding edge for the Road Dogs. And so a lot of those things, Aidan, we'll let everyone in on this game, but so many swings, and then Almar shows up and then ends up not playing, and so a DNP for him. I hope we get these 2 teams again, but we'll talk about the playoff stuff in a second. It's looking like, barring some crazy Week 8 stuff happening, that would be in the finals, and I'll get to that in a second. But kind of sticking in Week 7, Aidan, Gian, hello. If he does that, I think it's going to be almost more of a balance for them, right? Because if he's scoring 37, that's great. Maybe Hachi's not getting as many shots. Like Almar has been a great consistent scorer, rebounder, defender. The saying "there's only one ball" is true, and then of course the good teams figure it out, right? And they'll figure it out. How do they balance this? What does Lob City's peak look like with Gian, with Hachi, with Almar, with Cody, right? We can name their entire team. What does it look like, Aidan?
So I think it looks like another shot at a title, but again, Gian wasn't full force last week, and he hasn't played a game with a full force Almar. So there was late game situation. Almar was late, and you kind of want to think, oh, will he sub in? He doesn't have his jersey. That's a technical foul, and they get 2 free throws, and that's another 2-point swing right there. So I was thinking about that game side, what happens, but I think what Lob City was able to do is I think Gian was able to get comfortable and get back in the swing as he hasn't played much this season. and like previous Gian, like we said. But I think with the Road Dogs, I think what they needed is they somehow needed Kevin Views. Like you just said, his 2 threes. Anytime he makes threes, they're either always contested or they're deep pull-up transition threes, and it kind of stops whatever the other team is doing. And they're like, oh, shoot, Kevin Views just made a deep three. Let's kind of get on him. Now, he was 6 of 17 from the field. He's only played 4 games. I think he's missed the last 2, which it's a rougher shooting night. But I think they need to continue with those game changers and just keep going. Now, Joe, aside from his 53-point game previously, he hasn't had a fantastic season. He's had a good season, but I'd like to see his shooting numbers get up. But like Mike said, there was a scuffle. No mean stuff, but just kind of altercations and, Ethan dribbling too much or people dribbling too much, not setting up their shots. And as a team that's won a championship, they're going to have that. But they stopped and they continued to play the game they wanted to play. They were on a 26-2 run. They were on the losing side of that, and they were still found them ways to get back up and actually win the game. So it was a very good win for the Road Dogs. I think they kind of needed this win. They're 5-2, which is still great, but they've had some off weeks where no great shooting nights, no really star performances. But I think the Road Dogs kind of solidified themselves as being another championship contender.
And a great sign, like I talked about, for the Road Dogs after kind of altercation is even strong. It was just people disagreeing and like, what the hell's going on out here type of thing, right? Which is rightfully so, because Lob City went on a 26-2 run. They better be pissed, right? But a great response and reaction to that series of events for this Road Dog team. It's a good sign. A lot of teams, stuff starts to not go your way. People are bitching at each other. All right, throw this game out. We'll see you next week, right? Like just to throw it in, mail it in, pack it in, whatever phrase you want to use. Not the case for them. And also in that first half, my stats are gone. But Phil Krishlow, I hope I said it right. And I want to at least get the spelling up here because we haven't shouted him out a lot. Yeah, Krishlow, I love it. 5 points. It felt like more. And the key to him was actually playing like a big guy. And that's not meant to say in other weeks he hasn't played that way, but in other weeks he hasn't played that way, specifically against the halfway crooks. Like they have a great guards, right? We've named them the entire podcast so far. If they can get any type of post play, which in a league like this is kind of funny to talk about, but it's needed, where he's rebounding. You're able to give the ball to him in the post, and he's going to make a move and get an easier basket than maybe a kick out 3, right? You can kind of play some inside out for this Road Dogs team in the half court where they have struggled offensively. They're still a great team. They're 5-2. This is not meant to be any type of way. But when they're out and running, they're super dangerous, right? You keep them in the half court. That's step 1 to kind of defending the Road Dogs. If they get some better post play from some of their guys, it's going to make them harder to stop in the half court. For the Road Dogs, they get to 5-2 and are definitely no lower than the 3 seed. They can get to the 2 seed with a win and a halfway crooks loss because then they would have a better record, even though they don't have the head-to-head over the halfway crooks. If the Road Dogs were to lose in Week 8, when they take on Rags, which we'll see, interesting, if they were to lose, they would need a Mambas win over the halfway crooks, and there's a 3-way tie at 5-3, and things get very interesting in that scenario. But they still, that's where I think they could still technically fall to 2, 3, 4. So the lowest they can be is 4 in that scenario if everyone was tied and then the tiebreaker didn't go their way. That's for the Road Dogs. For Lob City, just while we're on them, and then we'll keep it moving, they're sitting at 3-4. If they win and the Mambas lose, they're the 4 seed. That's the highest they can get to at 3-4 because we talked about the halfway crooks and Road Dogs at 5-2. If Lob City wins and the Mambas win, they can't even jump the Mambas in that scenario. The Mambas would have a better record, and they would be the 5 seed, but it's still the 4-5 is kind of the same thing because you're playing each other in the quarterfinals. And if Lob wins, follow me, the Mambas lose to the halfway crooks and Rags win, that would give us a 3-way tie at 4-4 for the 4, 5, and 6 seed, and then it would be a tiebreaker game, which it looks like Rags has a negative 50-ish margin of victory over the season, so they would still be the 6. Rags is almost definitely the 6. They would need a lot of things to go their way, and that leaves Lob City almost certainly in that 4-5. But there is a scenario where if stuff goes to craziness, Lob City can fall to 6, but it's unlikely. All right, so we're looking at a 4-5 matchup with Lob City, who they will play, which let's get to the Halfway Crooks and Skyhawks game, because who they would play could get interesting if the Halfway Crooks show up in week 8 like they did in week 7, because oh boy, they better not show up like that in week 8. Trust me, it's not going to be a fun post game next week. The Skyhawks jump out and never look back, never give up the lead. A 79-68 win. It took an 11-point edge in the fourth quarter to make it respectable, and I don't even like using that word. A very strong Skyhawks performance and a very weak Halfway Crooks performance. Let two of you guys get in, and then we'll kind of flip-flop. But Mike, you haven't been on the show as much, and we can go around quickly. It's all right. Mike, Skyhawks look super dominant. How did they do it in that first quarter to take a 27-4 lead, and it was like a 19-2 run at some point? That's my stats. Yeah, I have stats too, Mike. A 19-2 run in that first quarter because the Halfway Crooks got the first 2 points. And then I remember sitting over there like, oh crap, it's 19-4. That's not good math for the Halfway Crooks. So Mike, how did the Skyhawks do that in that first quarter?
Big factor in that is Noah James coming off of a 40-point game on Monday in the Massachusetts League. They needed other people to step up in this game. Maybe he wasn't going to play as strong or as hard, knowing that they're playing the Halfway Crooks. So it was really Omar and Jalen coming up on top. The rookie, Jalen, had 21 points, shooting 62% from the field. I mean, that's great from a first-year player. And then Omar obviously staying consistent, scoring 20 plus a game. Then you also had Demoy scoring 10, Zakai in 10. And then, for the Halfway Crooks, it's mainly just Nick Lemoyne on offense. Kavai had 23 as well, but Kavai has mainly just been shooting more from the three-point line. Hasn't been much of a slasher as we saw from week 1 to week 4. So he's been shooting more of the three ball, and for the Skyhawks on defense, they've been able to hold him down and hold most of the shooting down, mainly besides Nick from the Halfway Crooks. So they were able to take up that lead, and then since after the first half, they were to take the 11-point victory.
I'll tell you right now, 7 for 20 is being kind, and I'll take care of that after the show. That's what the stats currently say. That's like 7 for 25, right? So you can go figure out what percentage that is for the Halfway Crooks. Not a good shooting night for the Halfway Crooks. We'll go to Aidan next, and Jalen Benson. The Skyhawks are pulling the vet move of kind of putting it in the ether. Defensive player of the year. And sure, you can do that, right? If you say that about me, it's not going to work. But Jalen Benson has been very good on defense the entire season. And really, Aidan, that was one of the keys. Every time the Halfway Crooks, all right, they're going to make, they made a shot. They finally got a stop and a freaking rebound, which was a struggle all night for the Halfway Crooks. It was Jalen Benson making a play on either end to be like, nope, it's going to be a 15-point lead and it's staying here. So I'll put Aidan on the spot, and I was thinking about this today. I think him and Omar are 2A and 2B. Aidan doesn't think so. Aidan thinks Jalen's their second best player, and so we can relive that from last week because, like I said last week, that makes someone the third best player that probably isn't going to be too thrilled with that answer. But Jalen was probably their best player in week 7. And that's great for a team that has options like that because you never really know who's going to take the reins, and that makes it harder to guard. But talk about him, and he's been on a tear these past couple weeks. I expect it to continue, so we're going to talk a lot more about Jalen Benson. But how important is he for this Skyhawks team trying to go 8-0 and then trying to most likely have to beat 2 of the 3 other top 4 teams in the league to cap this off with a title?
I think it's just staying consistently ready. And like you said, you guys would get a couple, you'd go on a little run, Nick would score, Kavai would get a layup, and then either Jalen would check in or he'd get back on the ball and be like, okay, look, you're not going to do this anymore. And like we said, like I mentioned last week, Noah wasn't in during crunch time. And Noah had a poor shooting night, unfortunately. Like Mike said, he used all of his points en masse on Monday. But, like I said, the fact that they can continue to play these games and be up without arguably their best, most skilled player playing in crunch time or having poor games, it's a key to success in this league. And like we've talked about, Jalen's been on the tear recently. Pretty sure he's averaging 4 or 4.5 steals per game, which is insane. Yeah, he had a 10-steal game, but the defensive abilities is there. He's always guarding the primary ball handler. Now, with Omar, he's got a couple moves. He's 1 for 1 from 3. He had a poor He's had poor shooting in the past, from what Noah has said and from the stats, but he never shies away from his game. He's going to run you into the ground if you're in his way. He'll do a spin, he'll set something up, but he's that guy who will always drive into the paint, and he's not scared to do that. Neither is Jalen Benson. And it was just a very strong performance from the Skyhawks, and they're continuing to show their dominance and show why they are legit contenders for the championship this season.
And just a lack of effort, and a lack of energy. Effort probably too, but energy is the word I was looking for by the halfway crooks in that first quarter. And the Skyhawks capitalized, and that's what good teams do. So it's not a knock at them, but a flat halfway crooks team that we haven't seen a lot this season. So Nick Lemoyne, 35. I'll just do the stats really quick. Kavai Simpson with 23, and that's it for the double-figure scores for the halfway crooks. So that explains a lot. Jalen Benson and Omar Rahman with 21 each. Noah James with 15. All threes. So don't know what that means, and he was still getting inside, just didn't realize that till right now. Demoy Ennis with 10, and Zeki Burgess with 10 and 7, doing Zeki Burgess things. Just, Skyhawks are going to be tough. They locked up the 1 seed. Their talk when it comes to the playoffs are easy. I'll give you the halfway crooks outlook, which is a hot mess and can go a ton of different ways. But the good news is the halfway crooks do control their own destiny, like I talked about when talking about the road dogs, where if the halfway crooks win in week 8, not that this game doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter as much. They're still the 2 seed, and it's on to the playoffs. It's a clean slate. Everyone's 0-0, right? What are you looking for in week 8 from the halfway crooks that needs to be different than what you saw in week 7, Jess?
I feel like what I'm looking for from the halfway crooks is kind of seeing all of the players kind of show out, because like in this past previous week, like with the Skyhawks, the fact that they are a team where every single week a different player can be like shining and being like the star player is what makes championships. So I feel like for the halfway crooks, and they have you guys have a roster, you have a winning team, and you have a lot of players who can dominate, but it's just making sure that you're all kind of collectively on your A game, and like, while a game like last week, I feel like the pacing kind of did a lot, because I think everyone was expecting like a Road Dogs Lob City, like high energy, high pace, like, but it was kind of slower, and it felt a little softer than it could have been, more explosive. It could have been. So I think just getting your energy up, getting your points up, doing everything that the team knows how to do, and just staying confident and knowing that you can take down a team like the Skyhawks.
And we'll move on, because that's plenty of time on this game that was horrible to have to watch in person. Just looking at the rebounding numbers, because that usually tells a lot, especially with a team like the halfway crooks. And I mean, the Skyhawks are going to dominate the glass, but 36-33 in favor of the Skyhawks. The halfway crooks had more offensive rebounds. I can't believe it. It really must have been that fourth quarter, and I think these stats would look very differently if we kind of take away that fourth quarter, which, yeah, the game flipped, but it didn't really flip enough where the Skyhawks ever felt, I think, any pressure, right? I think maybe for a smidge there, they were like, well, we better make one more shot to kind of put this thing away, and they did, and that was the game. So those stats are a little deceiving just because of how that fourth quarter went. Skyhawks are the 1 seed no matter what. In week 8, they will take on the Gold Rush, and so that'll kick off week 8. That's an early game. Yeah, wow, a little 6:30 game for the Skyhawks. All right, they better start driving now. And then for the halfway crooks, like I said, they control their own destiny, okay? So a win in week 8 over the Air Mambas, which we're going to get to the Air Mambas next, who could potentially still get up to a 3 seed. So talk about that's how things get shook up here like a snow globe if that happens in week 8. But the halfway crooks win. They're the 2 seed. They have the tiebreaker over the Road Dogs. It doesn't even matter. Now, if the crooks lose and the Road Dogs win, the crooks are the 4 seed, and both the Air Mambas and Road Dogs finish ahead of them. So that would be an and scenario. The Road Dogs need a win, and the halfway crooks need a loss. Road Dogs would be the 2. Crooks would fall to 4. Focusing on the halfway crooks, if they lose and the Road Dogs lose, that would mean the Air Mambas won, because they're playing the halfway crooks, and those 3 teams would be tied at 5-3 in the standings, and it would come down to a point differential, which the halfway crooks do hold a big advantage in right now. So in that scenario, the Mambas would have to win by 60 to kind of make up some of that ground. Crazier things have happened. But in that scenario, if the tiebreakers were to stay, the Crooks would still get the 2 seed with the 5-3 record, a 3-way tie. But the easiest scenario is if the Crooks win, they take care of business. The team they're playing in Week 8, like we talked about, the Air Mambas, they took care of their rival once again, the RI Warriors, 87-60. And this kind of now sets up some of the stuff I was talking about where things can really get interesting in Week 8 if the Air Mambas can carry this momentum over. All right, they take care of the RI Warriors. These next 2 games we can go a little more quickly on. I don't know where the hell I am. It was our last game. The Air Mambas got the win. Let me just keep rolling on some of this playoff stuff and we'll get some analysis. But for the Air Mambas, this win improves them to 4-3. And so the lowest they can be with their 4 wins is a 4 seed. Regardless of... Lob City beat... I think I'm a liar. I'm a big fat liar. The Air Mambas can still fall to 6. With a win, the Air Mambas, the lowest they can be is a 4 seed in that tiebreaker scenario. So a win, and they lock up a top 4 seed, which means the halfway Crooks in that scenario would be a 5 and would most likely take on Lob City. So that's kind of how some of the things get a little crazy, where Lob City and the halfway Crooks could be in that 4-5 matchup on the same side as the Skyhawks. That's not how this is supposed to go from a halfway Crooks biased fan. The Air Mambas win and the Road Dogs win. The Air Mambas would be the 3 seed like we talked about. If the Air Mambas lose, they could still be as low as a 6 seed if Lob City and Rags win, but the Air Mambas lose because it would be a 3-way tie at 4-4. So the Air Mambas are anywhere between 3 at their highest and 6. But just first this time. The Air Mambas with 19 points from Mario Valerio and 18 from Chris Vincenzo. Steve Simone hit 5 threes in his 15 points, and those were some big ones to kind of keep building the lead. The Air Mambas are 4-3, and we kind of talked about them as being that kind of 5th or 6th best team for much of the season. That all goes out the window, Jess, if they win in Week 8 and kind of crack that top 4 and then shuffle up all the matchups that would be taking place in the quarterfinals. What do they have to carry over? And I know I talk about that a lot, but we saw a very impressive performance from them in Week 7. They get the halfway Crooks for the first time this season, so 2 teams playing each other for the first time. What do they have to do again in Week 8?
They basically have to do everything that they did this game. I think that this was one of their best games watching it. I could literally close my eyes and see Mario Valerio going up with a dunk and Steve Simone hitting crucial threes throughout the entire game. They were just keeping it on it. And the RI Warriors, they weren't playing like how we've seen them in the past weeks. They were keeping it on them. It was a pretty fast-paced game. It was kind of going back and forth for a little bit there. But the Air Mambas, they just kept their composure and they kept their speed. And I think that if the stats stand for themselves. There's not much I can really say about it. And going back and reliving the game, if they just take what they did this past week and apply that to the halfway Crooks, I think that they have a pretty good shot.
Well, you'll get to make a pick, so get your one word ready, especially because Mike has no idea what the hell's going on. I love it. It gets to be a surprise. Mike, do you want to talk Air Mambas or Rags? He said Air Mambas. All right, awesome. So, Mike, let me give you some stats really quick. They dominated the glass is strong, 40-32, but it was Kevin Veter with 27 who kind of kept the RI Warriors in it, and so we talk a lot about him, but shout out to him with 27 on 10 of 15 shooting, so pretty efficient for him. But Mike wanted the Mambas. You can roll this into next week a little bit. I can't wait to hear some of your one words about the halfway Crooks and Mambas. It's going to be a fun time. But yeah, this Mambas team, even throughout the whole season, Mike, you haven't been on a ton, but 4-3, one of the best Mambas teams we've seen. We talked about it a lot, kind of comparing season after season. What's one of the best things that they do that they'll need to do in the playoffs?
I think, especially in the game against the Warriors, I think keeping everyone involved. They had 5 players in double digits. Mario Valero almost with 20, he had 19 points. Chris Vincenzo with 18, Steve Simone with 15, as we said, hitting some big shots. So I think that's the biggest difference between the Air Mambas and a team like the RI Warriors with Kevin Veter and Mark DaCosta, the only 2 players on the Warriors team in double digits, and Kevin Veter being heavily efficient from the field, still not enough to lose by 27. But I think it's that on offense, but also on defense. They're very pressuring on the outside shooting. especially from the Warriors, who take a lot of threes and aren't necessarily that efficient with a good defense like the Air Mambas pressuring them on that 3-point line. So I think just on offense, keep swinging the rock, keep getting everyone involved, and maybe they can even have 6 players in double digits if Anthony Ramsey can shoot one more three and get 10 points in week 8.
Yeah, we'll get some of your guys' previews for the halfway crooks and Air Mambas because I'm interested in some of the matchups as we kind of think about those two teams facing off. I'd already talked to Mario. I'm excited. I can't wait. It's always a fun time playing that team. The RI Warriors, we haven't talked too much about them in the playoff picture because they are locked in as the 7 seed. And let's get to Gold Rush and Rags. Gold Rush locked in. I don't know what I'm talking about. Locked in as the 8 seed, but Rags, we've talked about it, can kind of, with a win in week 8, can get into that 4, 5, 6 tiebreaker range, and then it comes down to point differential throughout the entire season. I can kind of tell you where they are in a second, but the Rags team bounced back and got the win in week 7. They defeated Gold Rush 81-68. It was kind of this type of game throughout. I mean, a huge second quarter, 23-6 for Rags. We'll go to Aidan first quickly on this Rags team because even just looking in, Josh Perry with 30, he had a really good game, 30 and 12. Clarence Brown with 21, Charles Perry with 12, and Kyle Wolf with 27 for Gold Rush, Brandon Taylor and Tyler McNeil with 17 each. I was doing the tiebreakers, Aidan, and not to completely ignore this game by Rags, but in Rags wins, they are plus 18, and in Rags losses, that means they're like minus 70. And I know that makes them a total of a minus 55 differential throughout the entire season. So the losses have been losses, and the wins have been kind of close throughout the season. We talked about it a lot. Having that lead against Lob City, they could use that win right now as we kind of look at the standings. Most likely, this Rags team is going to come in as the 6th seed, and then we'll be trying to figure out who they're going to play between those other 3 teams. We talked about shuffling in the upper part of the standings. But Aidan, is it as simple as like Josh Perry needs to keep everyone together and like figure this thing out? And I mean that in the nicest way possible, where he does so much for their offense. I think the defense is okay. I think as a team they can defend and kind of get rebounds and do that sort of thing. But scoring at times has been kind of an issue. And let me just kind of look at their totals. Yeah, 72, 69, 60, 81, 84. They never really broke 84 points this season as a team offensively. That could be enough if you're playing defense, but a team like that, needs to kind of probably score a little more against some of these other teams. What's the key for Rags? What you saw in Week 7 as they get ready for the playoffs?
I think the key is just continuing to play the way they played last week. Now, I know, like you just said, it's tough when you have Josh Perry who's facilitating and scoring and doing everything and keeping his team together, where one person can only do so much. And I think this is the game where Clarence Brown really shined. He had 21. He was 9 of 12 from shooting, 75% from the field. Now, we haven't seen that. He's averaging 13.6 points per game, but we haven't really seen a game where he was the second leading scorer like that. We might have. I may be misremembering. But this game, like, you could tell it was Josh and Clarence that were keeping the team together. Now, they were missing Wook. So, if you bring him in next week, and you continue to play that 3-headed monster where you're scoring, yes, you can continue, but there's only so, like I just said, there's only so much that Josh Perry can do with this team. Now, they shot 57% from the field, which is always good if you're shooting above 57%, but you're right in a sense that, is this the capped out version of Rags that we've seen? I don't think so, but it's tough when you can't put together a great scoring night or scoring over 80, 85, 90 points. But if you're letting the other team score more, obviously you're not playing great defense. It's not going to get well for you. But Rags, they've impressed me this season. Josh Perry's been super impressive, and I hope that they can continue playing like this and hopefully get an upset or play a great playoff game.
I'm smiling, and I'm going to put Mike back on the spot because he hasn't been on the show as much. Rags gets the Road Dogs in Week 8. If things go according to plan, and you can read into that exactly what you're expecting, the Halfway Crooks would be the 2 seed, Road Dogs would be the 3, and that would set up a kind of back-to-back scenario where then Rags would play the Road Dogs again in the 3-6 matchup in the playoffs. So, Mike, looking at that matchup, because we may get it 2 weeks in a row, And obviously the second time around has much more at stake if they were to meet again in the playoffs. And really, the first matchup doesn't matter if we get to a second matchup. It just comes, win one game. It doesn't matter if you lost in week 8 at that point. What's the secret sauce for Rags to just keep the game close? Because then at that point, it's a matter of 5 possessions, right? And that can swing either way depending on what's going on. But what does Rags have to do to keep a game against a team like the Road Dogs close to give themselves a chance if that was the matchup in the quarterfinals of the playoffs?
Yeah, for the Rags, I think it goes beyond Josh Perry. Josh Perry will always do his thing. He'll have 20, 25 guaranteed pretty much every night that he's playing at his full strength capacity. But I think it's the other players that he dishes the ball out to around him. Like we said, Clarence Brown with a 21 ball. Charles Perry, their third option in that game with 12, and then Devontae Davis with 8. So they have players that are able to shoot the ball, especially from the 3. It was Clarence Brown, 3 for 5, 60% from 3. I mean, that's great shooting, especially for him, who this season we haven't seen him be the second option, as Aidan was saying. So really, it's just on offense, but they're mainly an offense-heavy team. On the defensive end, we've seen the Rags struggle, mainly down low when they do have some other teams with bigger guys, such as the Skyhawks, or maybe even a team like the Road Dogs, where they do have big men down low. And so being able to hold them down in the paint and hold down the shooting on the defensive side might be able to help them cap off a W.
Yeah, and thinking about it, not that it's a 3-6 matchup is always going to be kind of close, but for the Road Dogs to get a team like that twice, you're going to have to put them away. We've seen that with Rags. Like, they're not going to give up. They're not going to roll over. And so that'll be kind of a fun. If we get it, it'll be a close to week 8. It's the last game in week 8 and potentially one of the games we'd see in the quarterfinals. All right. Before we do the one-word game and get out of here, because I know we're going a little long, here's kind of the seeding just ranges for the teams. I know I already explained everything. It's going to be the short version. Skyhawks are the 1 seed. They could do whatever they want in week 8. They're the 1 seed. The Crooks, if they win, they're the 2 seed. If they lose, the farthest they can fall is the 4 seed. The Road Dogs right behind them could get that 2 seed and could also still only go as low as 3 because of other tiebreakers. So the Road Dogs are 2 or 3 no matter what. The Air Mambas can still get up to 3. Again, they have to win and get some help. And the Mambas could still technically be 6, but most likely the lowest they would fall is 5. And they even have the 3-way tiebreaker over Lob City as of right now. The Air Mambas are plus 67, and Lob City is plus 6 on the season over all their games. And so if those 3 teams, like I talked about, finished with all the same record at 4-4, it's looking like the Air Mambas would be the 4. The 4 seed plays the 5 anyway, so we'd be setting up a Lob City Air Mambas potential 4-5 matchup. Lob City, the highest they can get is that 4 seed, and the lowest they can fall is 5. I guess technically 6, but again, we just talked about the tiebreakers. Rags are almost certainly the 6. Again, there's like one scenario with that tie. They'd have to win by a whole bunch. They could still technically be the 4 seed, but with the tiebreakers, it's not looking likely. The RI Warriors are the 7, and Gold Rush is locked in the 8. So again, one would play 8, 2 would play 7, 3 would play 6, 4 would play 5. So that's kind of what's at stake. And then, just to look ahead, we've kind of talked about this divide, right? The top 4 teams in the league and kind of the next 4. And the Air Mambas are on the verge with one strong game in week 8 and a win in week 8, and cracking that and then kind of making the bracket unbalanced from what we've seen all year, right? Like I talked about it could be halfway Crooks, Lob City in the 4-5, and that would be on the same side as the Skyhawks, where then the Road Dogs would, if they win, get the winner of an Air Mambas Rags. So one of those teams in the 3-6 could be in, and in that scenario, one of them would have to be in, unless they play forever and just tie. One of them would have to be in the semifinals. And so that's kind of how we get the top 4 teams all year battling each other earlier than expected. The halfway Crooks win, kind of all those scenarios go out the window, and kind of the 1-4 would be, well, the 1-4 or 5 would be set because the 4 or 5 play each other and they're close enough anyway. All right, one-word game presented by Initial Response Restoration. I'll explain it for the new listeners and for Mike. You get to make your pick on the game because we're the longest talking crew I've ever had on the Postgame show. You get to make your pick and then say one word as to why. It's a very original name. I get it, the one-word game. I spent a lot of time thinking of the name. But, like, you literally cannot explain it. If you try to explain it, I'll mute you. Like, you get one word. So you have to make the word good. Okay? We'll go right in order for Week 8. We start off with Skyhawks Gold Rush. I'll put Jess on the spot first. Who do you have winning, and what's your one word?
I have Skyhawks, and my word is chemistry.
All right. Aidan?
I'm also going to be picking the Skyhawks. I'm not going to say a name. Consistency.
Okay. Mike?
Skyhawks, I'm going to say highlight.
All right. I like it. 3 for the Skyhawks. Moving on. Halfway Crooks Air Mambas. I might give you 2 words if you want for this one. I'll break my own rule because it should be a good game. You know who I would pick. Aidan, who do you have winning? And then your 1 to 2 words. We can break the rules.
I've been high in the Mambas all season, but I'm going to stick with the Halfway Crooks for this pick. Nick Lemoyne. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. There you go. You don't even have to hyphenate it because I let you break the rules. All right, Mike, who do you have winning in your... It's not the same ring. Your 2 words. Go ahead.
I'm also going to say halfway crooks, and I'm going to say I only need one. I'm just going to say speed. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Like it. Jess?
I'm also going to say the halfway crooks. I don't really have to explain this one either. Just my word was going to be offense, but if they can play offensively and dominate.
She just said a whole sentence. She really broke the rule. It's okay. It's all right. I think and I'll break the whole game here. I think the most interesting part of this matchup, and the Air Mambas have been great, and they've been playing really well this season. I would expect the length to be the difference. And so I think that was an easy one-word choice, so I'm glad you guys didn't take it. That'll be my one word. They have talent. They've shot it well. They've attacked the rim. Chris Vincenzo's been great. Mario Valerio's been great. Steve Simone is one of those guys that should be able to match up with some of the halfway crooks, and they'll need him to kind of play a little bigger than he has all year. I would expect the length. I'm trying to think what game that was that we saw that kind of against Rags. I expect it to be a replica of the halfway crooks Rags game where, close for most of the game, Air Mambas were able to get some offensive rebounds and get some steals, get some stops, and kind of maybe get a little bit of a lead in that second quarter around halftime-ish. And then it's just too much athletic. That's what I would expect from having seen, who knows how many Legacy Leagues games. That's my expert analysis and biased opinion, of course. Duh. Lob City and the RI Warriors. Mike, you can go first. Your pick and your one word. Oh, I can't unmute you, Mike. There you go.
I'm going to go Lob City, and I'm going to say 3 ball.
All right. Aidan.
I'm going to also go Lob City. Gian. Again.
Okay, yeah, we are back to one word, so we had a little hyphen action going on with Mike. That's all good. Jess, who you got?
I also have Lob City. I'm going to go full roster.
Okay, yeah, now we're cheating. I love it. I love it.
Hyphenating.
All right, and to close out the regular season, the last game of Week 8, Road Dogs and Rags. I guess the Road Dogs at this point will know what they have to play for, because if the Halfway Crooks were to win before them, they would be the 3 seed even if they lost. Not that they're still not going to try to win. Jess, we'll go back around. Who do you have winning this one and your one word?
Road Dogs. And my word would be cohesive.
All right. Mike.
I'm also going to go Road Dogs, and I'm going to go playmaking.
I think that is actually one word. So he's
one
alive.
word. Yeah, that's one word.
He's alive. All right, Aidan.
Road Dogs. Defense.
Yeah. Well, we will see. We talked about it, and we could get a rematch of that Road Dogs Rags game the next following week when the quarterfinals will take place. So the regular season will end. We'll come back next week knowing those matchups. By the time you see this show next week, the bracket will be out, but it's going to be 1 versus 8 on the same side as 4 and 5. 2 will play the 7 on the same side of the bracket as 3 and 6. You could think like March Madness, matchups in that scenario. And then we'll have the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals, and we'll do some fun all-star stuff as well down the road. But next week, we get to pick which 4 teams we expect to advance to the semifinals. And so hopefully that'll be not as clear cut as we expect. It kind of depends on the matchups, right? And kind of, who falls where and who's playing who. But some things still to play for in week 8. Mike, Aidan, and Jess, good job. A long show, a needed long show with all the scenarios, but good job picking the games, breaking stuff down. One more week in the regular season. Crazy. And then playoff time, which is the best time. In July. Playoffs in July. I can't even think of the last time that's happened. Usually it's in August. But playoffs are almost here, and then we'll see who wins it all. We'll see if the Skyhawks can remain undefeated. And if playoff Lob City makes an appearance. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But guys, good job, everybody. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for all the content. And we'll see you in week 8.